please welcome to the stage CEO and co-founder of Web Summit, Paddy Cosgrave.
Wow, you're incredibly welcome to Web Summit, and incredibly welcome to the beautiful city of Lisbon. So I'd love to ask this side of the audience to show their appreciation in a huge round of applause for our host country, Portugal. That's not bad. Now I want to ask this side to give a huge round of applause to our host country, Portugal. And now I'm going to ask everyone, including all the presidents and prime ministers from around the world, everyone put your hands together for Portugal. It's incredible that so many of you have joined us from all over the world. My wife, Faye, and our one-year-old son, Cloud, are joining us for the first time, along with my dad. You're incredibly welcome. They're just down here in the front. You're very, very welcome, guys. We've 59,000 fully badged attendees at Web Summit, but in total, when you include staff, media, contractors, everyone, just over 81,000 people from more than 170 countries will pass through the doors of Web Summit over the next 4 days. You're all going to meet so many incredible people. No doubt, just sitting around you right now are brilliant entrepreneurs, engineers, investors, and more from all corners of the planet. And networking lies at the heart of Web Summit. Web Summit is all about networking. In a moment, I'm going to ask all of you to stand up and introduce yourself to people around you. Just say hello to 3 people, and then we'll all sit down. Are we ready? Let's all stand up. Come on, here we go. Everybody, let's all stand up. Oh, good to see you.
Ready.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Now, you can all slowly begin to sit back down. There'll be lots more time for chatting. That was great. So, I'm not too sure if you know that using the Web Summit mobile app, you can do what you've just done to absolutely anyone at Web Summit. You can say hello to Al Gore, Werner Vogels, the CTO of Amazon, or Martin Garrix. It's the most powerful tool we all have at Web Summit. My one tip is to connect your phone book. This will help you find friends and colleagues at Web Summit, and will help friends you don't even know were here find you. So, Web Summit started as a simple idea in 2010. Let's connect the technology community with industries both old and new. Less than 400 people came to that first Web Summit. The number of investors, for example, was just 4 in 2010. Fast forward to 2007, and there are more than 1,500 of the world's leading technology investors here. Web Summit has become the largest gathering of technology investors, startups, and technology CEOs in the world. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to give a very special group a huge round of applause. To my 160-person team who work year-round on Web Summit, and to the well over 5,000 contractors, temporary staff, security personnel, and, perhaps most importantly, the incredible young volunteers from more than 50 countries around the world, a huge, huge round of applause. Woo! So why are we all here at Web Summit? We're at an inflection point, the kind of inflection point that comes around not once in a lifetime, but once in several lifetimes. Tech is turning upside down everything we thought as certain about work, society, politics, and life on Earth itself. On the one hand, it's very exciting. Technology's impact is only just beginning. But on the other hand, there's much happening in the world because of technology that is deeply, deeply concerning. On center stage tonight and over the coming days, world leaders, tech CEOs, and others will talk about the promise of technology, and they'll also talk about its perils. More than 1,000 speakers will also take you on deeper dives across more than 20 industry-specific conferences spread right across this huge Web Summit campus. Now, at Web Summit, we like surprises, and our next guest has a special surprise for you. This is fantastic. He's the CEO and founder of one of Portugal's leading startups, fresh from raising $50 million. Please welcome from Feedzai, Nuno Sebastião.
Whoa. Golly, what an audience. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Patty and Web Summit, for inviting me to be part of the opening night here at Web Summit. Particularly, I'm humbled and proud to be here as we are in my own country. Portugal is a country with exploration at its roots. We come from a long, long line of explorers. The reason that Magellan and those like him before him were such iconic explorers was their constant quest to discover the unknown, to always push past boundaries. My own journey started at the European Space Agency, where I helped push the physical boundaries of our own planet Earth. Now, with my team at Feedzai, we are pushing past new boundaries, using artificial intelligence to fight financial crime for some of the world's largest companies. We seek to keep pushing the limits of knowledge and innovation, and it's Feedzai's mission to explore these new tech frontiers, but also to use what we build to build a better world. With exploration comes risks. and tremendous responsibility. Artificial intelligence, AI, is an incredible tool. There's no doubts about it. And while it's already having huge impact in many industries, it's still in its early days of development. And because it's such a powerful tool that will be streamed throughout much of our daily lives, we also need to assure that it's being put to good use in our world. Doctors, they take an Hippocratic oath to make sure that ethics are a central part of their practice. Other professionals have similar codes. And there has long been a chatter for the need of a code of ethics for engineering and for others involved in AI development, including recent regulatory pushes. But it's easy to say that it needs to be done. It's far harder to actually build the framework for what needs to be done. So what can we do? As AI leaders, it actually starts with us. It starts with the engineers and the companies building AI, the investors who are funding these companies, and the clients, the customers who buy from them. We are the ones that are responsible for understanding and the checks of balances needed in order to eliminate biases in AI's decision-making process. And to put resources into the teams that continue research on the risk and on what we are building, and to design code that benefits all of humanity. Of course, it's not easy to take those actions, but it's vitally important. It is something that our children and grandchildren will thank us and will be proud of us for pioneer. And it's in the spirit of this being a pioneer in developing technology for the greater good that we invited the next speaker to help us open Web Summit. We wanted someone that shared Fidzai's same beliefs for optimism for the future. And someone that together will be able to transcend boundaries. And no other person embodies more this than our next guest speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and privilege to present.
Can you hear me? My name is Stephen Hawking. I would like to thank Fidzai for inviting me to speak with you today. I wish to welcome you all to Web Summit. I plan to speak about artificial intelligence, a topic that is of importance to you professionally and to society at large. There are many challenges and opportunities facing us at this moment, and I believe that one of the biggest of these is the advent and impact of AI for humanity. As most of you may know, I am on record as saying that I believe there is no real difference between what can be achieved by a biological brain and what can be achieved by a computer. Of course, there is unlimited potential for what the human mind can learn and develop, so, if my reasoning is correct, it also follows that computers can, in theory, emulate human intelligence and exceed it. We cannot predict what we might achieve when our own minds are amplified by AI. Perhaps with the tools of this new technological revolution, we will be able to undo some of the damage done to the natural world by the last one, industrialization. We will aim to finally eradicate disease and poverty. Every aspect of our lives will be transformed. In short, success in creating effective AI could be the biggest event in the history of our civilization, or the worst. We just don't know. So we cannot know if we will be infinitely helped by AI, or ignored by it, and sidelined, or conceivably destroyed by it. Unless we learn how to prepare for and avoid the potential risks, AI could be the worst event in the history of our civilization. It brings dangers, like powerful autonomous weapons, or new ways for the few to oppress the many. It could bring great disruption to our economy. Already we have concerns that clever machines will be increasingly capable of undertaking work currently done by humans, and swiftly destroy millions of jobs. AI could develop a will of its own, a will that is in conflict with ours, and which could destroy us. In short, the rise of powerful AI will be either the best, or the worst thing, ever to happen to humanity. That is why in 2014, I and a few others called for more research to be done in this area. I am very glad that someone was listening to me. What is the answer? To control AI and to make it work for us, and eliminate, as far as possible, its very real dangers, we need to employ best practice and effective management in all areas of its development. It goes without saying, of course, that this is what every sector of the economy should incorporate into its ethos and vision, but with artificial intelligence this is vital. Everyone here today is in the vanguard of AI development. We are the scientists, we develop an idea. But you are also the influencers, you need to make it work. Perhaps we should all stop for a moment and focus our thinking not only on making AI more capable and successful, but on maximizing its societal benefit. Our AI systems must do what we want them to do, for the benefit of humanity. Interdisciplinary research can be a way forward, ranging from economics and law, to computer security, formal methods, and of course, various branches of AI itself. Such considerations motivated the American Association for Artificial Intelligence's presidential panel on long-term AI futures, which up to recently had focused largely on techniques that are neutral with respect to purpose. However, in January this year, MEPs called for more comprehensive robot rules in a new draft report concerning rules on robotics, and citing the development of AI as one of the most prominent technological trends of our century. The report calls for a set of core fundamental values, an urgent regulation on recent developments to govern the use and creation of robots and AI. Somewhat surprisingly, this includes a form of electronic personhood to ensure the rights and responsibilities for the most capable and advanced AI. One of the partners at the multinational law firm, Osborne Clark, says that we don't give whales and gorillas personhood, so there is no need to jump at robotic personhood. But the wariness is there. The report acknowledges the possibility that within the space of a few decades, AI could surpass human intellectual capacity and challenge the human-robot relationship. Finally, the report calls for the creation of a European agency for robotics and AI that can provide technical, ethical, and regulatory expertise. If MEPs vote in favor of legislation, the report will go to the European Commission, which will decide what legislative steps it will take. I am an optimist, and I believe that we can create AI for the good of the world. That it can work in harmony with us. We simply need to be aware of the dangers, identify them, employ the best possible practice and management, and prepare for its consequences well in advance. Perhaps some of you listening today will already have solutions or answers to the many questions AI poses. We all have a role to play in making sure that we, and the next generation, have not just the opportunity, but the determination, to engage fully with the study of science at an early level, so that we can go on to fulfill our potential, and create a better world for the whole human race. We need to take learning beyond the theoretical discussion of how AI should be, and take action to make sure we plan for how it can be. You all have the potential to push the boundaries of what is accepted, or expected, and to think big. We stand on the threshold of a brave new world. It is an exciting, if precarious, place to be, and you are the pioneers. I wish you well. Thank you for listening.
What a powerful reminder by one of the greatest minds on our planet about the promise of technology and its potential perils. So many of the greatest sci-fi movies, so many of the greatest superhero movies are about us, humans, using science and technology to give ourselves superpowers. Think of Wolverine, think of Iron Man, think of Captain America, think of the Incredible Hulk. Those stories are about playing God with what it is to be human. But this idea of fundamentally altering, accelerating, and redefining what it is to be human used to be the stuff of pure fantasy, but not anymore. Our next guest, Brian Johnson, has already built and sold one technology company, Braintree, for almost $1 billion. His new company, Kernel, is truly mind-blowing. Kernel promises to hack our brains using cutting-edge technology that would unleash incredible superpowers within all of us. So sure is Brian of this future that he's already invested $100 million of his own money in Kernel. The New York Times, TechCrunch, CNBC have been talking and talking about Brian Johnson and Kernel. And so it gives me great pleasure to ask you to give a huge welcome to the founder of Kernel, Brian Johnson.
Hi, everybody. What a privilege it is to be here tonight, especially being before Stephen Hawking. Patty, thank you for that kind introduction. I'm here to speak to you tonight about what Stephen was talking about, that is the future of the human race. And it's something that I think is pressing. In fact, I invested the $100 million in Kernel because I believe that we are about to enter into the most consequential revolution in the history of the human race, and specifically that we were going to build the tools to read and write our neural code so that we can take control of our cognitive evolution. So before I get into this, I want to tell you a little bit how this got started. It actually was 20 years ago when I was in Ecuador working as a Mormon missionary, living among extreme poverty for 2 years. I returned back to the States and I had this overwhelming desire to try to improve the lives of others. I looked around at the options I had, and I couldn't really find anything I thought was a fit. So I thought, you know what? I'll become an entrepreneur. I'll make a whole bunch of money by the age of 30. Then with all this money and freedom of time, I'll go do something useful. In my naive 21-year-old mind, and lucky me, it happened. I sold my company, Braintree, to PayPal in 2013. With a fresh perspective, I got to ask this question. Now I'm in this privileged position. I have the money. I don't need the permission of anybody to do what I want to do. What do I do? And the question was, how do I create the most value for the human race? So I surveyed the world. But before I get into it, let me get a feel of all of you here. When you look at the future and you think about all the problems we have, but all the wonderful things we have going on, how many of you think, you know what? We've got this. Like, we can solve this. Show of hands. Okay? Second question, how many of you look at the same set of problems and challenges and say, I don't really know if we can do this? Show of hands. Okay, I'm with this latter group. I think the data does show that the world is getting better. We've never had less violence, the standard of living's never been higher. We're generally trending in the right direction. But I think the future is complex for a number of reasons. One is I think the pace of change is accelerating. That creates stressors on our society. Things we have to deal with we otherwise didn't have. When things move really fast, it puts us in a difficult spot. And number two, emergent complexity. It's becoming increasingly hard to manage our society. So the only image that comes to my mind is I think the future is kind of like a Category 5 hurricane that's going to bear down on us with so much force. And I have images of having it leave us without power and water and be able to cooperate. The single greatest thing we can do as a species is to work on our adaptability, our ability to evolve with this change. Now, when I went through these problems, I assessed the world and I formed my conclusions, but I thought, you know what? Maybe I'm off. Like maybe I really don't understand the reality. So I thought, I'll do the most reasonable thing anyone would do. I asked my 7-year-old daughter, baby, what's on your mind? What do you think about the future? And we got this list. We have, there we go. So number 1 of her concerns, monsters. Number 2, her parents dying. Well, I guess that's me. 3, our snake Nagini coming back to life, who happens to be in the walls, dying, sadly. 4th, animals taking over the world. Now, why does she think this is the case? Because monsters want to kill her, and take over the world because they want to be rich, to have a slide in their backyards, have bumpy cars, and then force people to play with them. Now, this seems cute and funny, but when I started thinking about her concerns, I actually found that my concerns are pretty similar to hers. Let's take monsters, for example. I, too, am scared of monsters, just not monsters under my bed, monsters inside my head. My father suffered from drug addiction for the first 25 years of my life. My stepfather has signs of Alzheimer's. It's devastating to watch someone you love lose their humanhood right before their eyes. And 3, I suffered from chronic depression for a decade. I wanted, with the greatest amount of intensity I could explain, to just cease to exist. I had children, and that wasn't a way out, but I can tell you I wouldn't wish that on anybody. Number 2, parents dying. I, too, am scared about dying. I grew up in this Mormon household where I was told there's a God, and this God has a plan, and if you obey the rules of this God, you get this amazing afterlife. It was an amazing deal, so I obeyed the rules. And as I grew older, I decided, I don't know if I believe this anymore. And I had this shocking realization where I had to reconstruct my existence from scratch. Why do I exist? What is my purpose? What is my meaning? Now it's all in my responsibility to create this life to be as amazing as possible, not the next life. Number 3. Number 3, Nagini coming back to life. Even though the ball python was, well, in the wall, we recognize this fear as things we don't see, things that come back to bite us, things that blindside us, things we create in the name of progress, such as social media, that come back and influence the elections for an undesirable outcome. And 4, animals taking over the world. It's a wonderful opportunity for Stephen Hawking to have spoken about AI. 2017 kind of seems like the year where we all became a little frantic about the realization that AI may take over the human race. And I don't think those concerns should be discredited. I think we should be very thoughtful about these things. At the same time, I personally am much more concerned about human behavior than I am about AI. The power for a single individual to create a bio attack, to knock us off the electrical grid, is devastating. We cannot let singular individuals create so much destruction in society. And so, in fact, in thinking this through, in Stephen Hawking's discussion, I drew this little picture on a napkin this morning. Let me see if I can pull this up. So whatever you believe about AI, let's say you believe that the growth of AI is up and to the right. Let's say you believe it's more in a linear curve. Let's say you think it's punctuated at equilibrium or start and stops. Whatever you believe, you can say it's up and to the right. If we look at human ability, it's flatlined. We have gone from clubbing each other with stones to shooting each other with automatic weapons. So at what point in time do we look at the difference between the capability set of our tools, or AI, and our own abilities and say, we feel really uncomfortable with this? And how much lead time do we need from making that realization that it might make sense to make our own evolution, our ability increase, the number one priority of the human race? So in thinking about all this, the problems we have in the world, the things we have to go about doing it, this is why I've started Kernel. When I looked at the world and I tried to assess who's investing in the brain, who's trying to improve its abilities, who's putting the capital there, is the government doing it, are entrepreneurs doing it, are venture capitalists funding it? How often do we talk about it? I, in fact, had 12 dinners over the past year. And I would start the dinners and say, let's imagine we're living in the world 2050. And we're very happy. We built this remarkable world. What did we focus on in 2017 that allowed us to build this amazing world? And without fail, I got the same answers every time. Climate science, education, AI, security. The same answers every single time. But you know what? Not a single person mentioned the brain. Yet everything we are, everything we build, and everything we aspire to become stems from the brain. So why is the brain such a blind spot in our society? Kernel is a first attempt at trying to make a dent in the tools we build today. So what is the state of play? What could we do? We have MRI machines to image our brains. We have EEG to record, to meditate. We have a TDCS to stimulate for addiction. These tools are amazing. I don't mean to belittle them at all. But they are far lacking the power we need to read and write our cognition. So when I say that, what does that mean? Like, what are some examples to make that tangible? Imagine if I had a tool to interface with my brain where I could walk a mile in someone else's shoes. What if I could feel what it was like to be you? What if I could understand your contextual framework? What if I understood your memories and your emotions? Would that change the way we deal with each other, the way we cooperate, the way we make decisions? Would that change our creative ability? What if, instead of destroying our enemies, we destroyed the concept of enemies? And what if our imaginations on the potential of our own cognitive abilities was much like the 1800s, where if you went there and you said, "Sir or madam, could you please tell me, could you please give me a rousing speech on the potential of electricity? What will it power one day?" They probably would have said, lights. That's the key. Our imagination constrains us with what we're familiar with. Now, in building these technologies, and in any revolution, it is not guaranteed that things are going to go well. We've seen that happen many times. Revolutions come, windows open up, the old is pushed aside, and a new narrow window is opened up. So how might we be thoughtful in building these technologies? Let's give you one example. When I use Facebook today, I log in and I socialize with my friends and my family. In exchange for that, they acquire as much data as they possibly can about me. They know me better than my girlfriend. And that's the same relationship I have with Google and Twitter and the government, who is also collecting everything they can about me. I really dislike this relationship. Now let's imagine if we have these interfaces and we're streaming our thoughts and our secrets and our imaginations and our fantasies in real time. I really dislike that relationship. So what if we had the power of these tools, and what if we could drop these things in the blockchain? And what if we said that human data privacy was a human right? And that in doing that, we leverage these tools to recreate societal structure on trust, security, to work against things like terrorism or mass shootings. Where if you are represented by the blockchain and you are secure with all your information and you give permission to others, but then people build algorithms of security to hit your blockchain and say, is this person safe to enter Web Summit? We can rebuild it. The idea that a centralized government can keep society safe is insane. We have to rebuild these fundamental architectures. So, two final thoughts. One is, we have broadly agreed as a society that we respect reading and writing as a fundamental need for all of us. It allows us to communicate, cooperate, share information. There's another form of literacy that we need as a society, and that is future literacy. So I was recently in Saudi Arabia with a gentleman who was telling me about his 2030 goals for his country. And I thought, that's amazing, because that's 13 years away. The world's going to change 100 times over between now and then. And I said, let's play a game here. Let's imagine that we have a robot. We're trying to get it to the far end of that sandhill over there. And so we program the robot. We do a topographical map of the area, and it programs to wind its way through the sand to get to that point. The problem with that plan is the moment the robot begins, the sand shifts, and now the robot's stuck. The better way to do it would be to say, we build the robot, we get the sand dune, and we program the robot to respond in real time to anything that comes its way. So no matter how the sand shifts, it can move and hit the endpoint. We as a society need to become that adaptable. And the key to becoming that adaptable is building this baseline tool of technologies and cognitively intervening. So in short, a revolution on the scale of something we've never seen is coming. It's going to be on our front doorsteps in 15 to 20 years on a scale we've never seen before. A window's going to open up, and we're going to have a shot at building something remarkable. And once we build it, it's going to close. So I'm going to go home with my daughter. I'm going to say, baby, I know you've got a lot on your mind. I get it. Monsters are scary. Nagini's in the wall. Animals taking over the world. I hear you. But guess what? I'm working on these things, and I just talked to 15,000 people in Lisbon, and they're working on it too. And guess what? We'll do this. So let's not fuck this up. Thank you.
So that was Surf Summit. Every year, the weekend before Web Summit, we gathered 250 investors and startups. We put them together. Some of them surf, some of them mountain bike, some of them hike, and they spend 2 very intimate days together. And that's a very rapid edit that's just been done over the last few hours by the team. And we'll open for applications for Surf Summit in the coming weeks for 2018. So everything that we have talked about tonight and all of the content over the next 3 days reveals the powerful influence that technology, and by extension technology companies, hold on all of our lives. Our next guest is someone who is charged with ensuring the tech companies play fair. She's already leveled unprecedented fines against companies like Google and Amazon, including Apple's recent €13 billion fine. In my view, hold your applause for her. In my view, our next speaker is one of the most important people in the world today. Please welcome, in conversation with the executive editor of Recode, Kara Swisher, the European Commissioner for Competition, Margaret Vestager. Woo!
Thank you. Wow. I feel like Beyonce, but not really. Not even slightly.
But we have the Madonna.
We have them, yeah. We're
Yes.
not going to sing for you. All right, let's get started because we have a very short time. So, Marguerite, how fucked is Silicon Valley?
Well, I don't like to generalize because everyone should have a fair chance of making it,
Right.
also in Silicon Valley.
Okay.
But at least serious enough so that we found that a fine of 2.4 billion euros was the fine in the Google case that we just decided.
So talk about where it is now, because you've been out on the forefront of talking to these companies about their power, about their influence, and right now in the United States, finally, in Congress, which has acted not at all, and our government has not acted very much against these companies, they're under siege, they're under pressure, especially about the Russia investigations. Can you talk a little bit about why you first went for them? Because I think they don't have a sense of their power, and now people are recognizing the potential impact of what they've done.
Well, our values are very simple. If you're successful in the market, it should be because you have the best product, that your customers like you, not because that you cut corners, or you get a tax break, or you don't inform authorities about how things actually are. And this is the case of the Apple case of unpaid taxes, and the Google case of misusing a dominant position, or the Facebook fine of not giving sufficient information to authorities when assessing a case. And on top of sort of my day job as a commissioner of competition, I have this worry about what happens with our democracy, what happens with our way of being together, being social. And I think maybe sometimes the platform businesses, they underestimate the powers that they hold.
All right, let's talk about that, because right now these investigations are, it's pretty clear these platforms were used and abused by others, in this case, Russia. And a lot of the indications point that it had an impact on the election. And of course, it's not just a US issue, it's a global issue, that these platforms have enormous influence over politics, society, culture, all kinds of things, including the coarsening of society. One of the things I've always talked about is the fact that they're not benign platforms and they see themselves that way. They often do. Can you talk about the challenge of dealing with these big companies? Because largely they've been protected by the government in the US.
Well, for us the challenge is to develop the right tools. Because I find that sort of the founders of the European Union, they saw rightly that we need fair competition to have a fair market.
Right.
And I think the motives of breaching competition law, they are as old as Adam and Eve. It's about greed and fear And when you combine that with power, you have a very, very poison cocktail. So the motives, well, they go way back. But our challenge is to stay fast enough and to have the right tools, because this is fast-moving areas in our economy. And we really need to make sure that all the businesses, all the coming ups, all the entrepreneurs have a fair chance of making it in this market to serve citizens in their role of customers.
Do you imagine, though, that the damage is done? Because so many of these companies, right now, there's consolidation in the United States. These companies are getting more powerful. One of the things that you'd been accused of by these companies is you're trying to stifle innovation, when in fact, they're getting more powerful than ever. So can you talk about that accusation that you're trying to do protectionist, stifle innovation, not let them do what they do best?
But on the contrary, because I think everyone here would like to be the next Google. Who doesn't want to build a success? But
well, I don't, but go ahead.
Well, you are a success already, so no need.
Yeah.
No, but the thing is that, one thing is that when you grow,
Yeah.
you shouldn't deny others the chance to challenge you. And you should never yourself say, no one will challenge me, so I don't need to innovate anymore. Competition is one of the most important drivers of innovation, because you have to stay in the race, you have to think of something new. And if you don't, well, of course, you should leave the market. And this is, again, where competition law enforcement comes in, to make sure that it actually happens.
So let's talk about the state of play with these fines that you've put in. You've levied these fines. The one right now in the United States, there's tax reform going on to bring back some of these, such as the Apple taxes and the billions that are here. Can you talk about where they are at this point, what happens now?
Well, the thing is that even if you appeal a case after a commission decision, you still have to pay the fine. Of course, if you win, then you get your money back. If you don't, well, we redistribute the fine to member states of the European Union. So the fines of the Google case, the guarantees has been made. The fines of the Facebook case has been paid. And now we're in the process of Ireland to recover the unpaid taxes of Apple. But the Commission as such is also working on digital taxation as a matter of principle, because corporate taxation was maybe invented in a time where you had a physical footprint. You were present in the country. Now you can be present in the country by buying more server space back home. Right. So we need to reinvent corporate taxation to make sure that every company pays their fair share of taxes.
Well, talk a little bit about today's news about the International Committee Investigative Journalists uncovered the Paradise Papers, which was essentially a scheme. It seems like I'm trying to bring it down to a very simple level. It's rich people trying to hide their wealth, essentially, ultra-rich people. Can you talk a little bit about how you look at something like this? Because there were several tech companies involved. There were investments that were hidden in shell companies, all kinds of things. So what was your thoughts today? Because it's a very complex and robust system to protect these companies and the people involved.
Yeah, but that has to change.
So how does that happen?
It
Well,
really
talk about
has to
what
change.
you thought today when you saw those.
Well, I think thanks to citizens, there's been an enormous pressure because of the LuxLeaks first and the Panama Papers, and now with the Paradise Papers, for legislation to change. For transparency, we would like to have also public country-by-country reporting. Just report simple things. Do you have activities? Do you have employees? Do you make a profit? Do you pay your taxes? So that we know. And second, we would like also all the tax intermediaries, those who make this happen, to feel responsibility of enabling some businesses not to pay their taxes, where the many businesses, they do pay their taxes.
Well, how do you do that? Because this, I mean, the scope of what's going on here, I mean, this is, I'm assuming it's just the tip of an iceberg here of how they do protect their monies going forward. And one of the things, for example, with Facebook, I think all of us understood that there was Russian government money invested in Twitter and Facebook and other places, but now it's very clearly outlined of how that works. How do you, with your powers, begin to change that? And you're a very hopeful person, but I'm not. And I'm assuming they'll figure out ways to subvert all these things.
Oh yes, but people like me never get unemployed, unfortunately. But I think we can take steps forward to improve things.
Right.
I have a very strong tool in competition law enforcement to do merger control, to look into cartels, misuse of dominant position, when member states hand out favors, for instance, in terms of tax breaks. But even though that's a strong tool, it cannot solve everything. We need regulation as well to say, well, these are sort of the basic rules of how the market should work. And that's in particular within taxation, to make sure that our tax authorities have the right tools and they know the full history of a company. And that has actually been passed as legislation in the European Union within the last couple of years.
Right. That is counter to what's going on in the United States, which obviously has an impact. We have tax reform going on that's essentially give-backs to wealthy people. That's what seems to be going on. We've got a president who, I'm not going to go on about other things, but wants to, I could. By the way, I'm still sorry, Europe. I apologize for the United States of America. But he wants to remove regulation. That's one of his most popular stances, is the idea of removing regulation, removing oversight, removing any kind of strictures against these companies and their growth. How do you battle that when these companies are in the United States, they're not being pulled back by the authorities in the United States?
But the thing is, I never feel more European than when I'm in the States. Because we're different.
Right.
We have built up a market, a single market, where you have a potential of 500 million customers. But it's a market where you care. You care about environment, working conditions, human rights, taxes being paid. Because we want a free market, but we know that the paradoxes of a free market is that sometimes you have to intervene. You have to make sure that it's not the law of the jungle, but the laws of democracy that works.
Right. So, talk a little bit about where it's going to, because one of the issues I've been writing about a lot, are talking about a lot in podcasts and various things, are what's coming next. In a lot of ways, a lot of the things you're talking about are technologies, not of the past, but of the previous behaviors. Coming up, AI, robotics, automation, transportation, self-driving cars, but the whole change of the transportation system, infrastructure, new cities. Is that an area that you think you all have, that you have to begin to look at strongly? Because I literally was just in an Amazon warehouse in Kent, Washington, where there are people there and they're working there, but the robotics is both breathtaking and disturbing to see at the same time. How do you look at those, and do you think, because they're real advantages when you have a robot to boss around versus a person. So how do you look at that?
Well, 2 points. First of all, we take an interest in data. Because sometimes it's nothing, but sometimes it's a real barrier to entry, which makes it very, very difficult for others to come into this market. So we take care and look into mergers if the amount of data will disable competition.
Yeah.
And the second point is that I think some of these algorithms, they will have to go to law school before they're let out.
Okay, all right. Meaning? What does that mean?
Well, the thing is that...
Because I don't recommend anybody go to law school, but go ahead.
Well, I have a thing with lawyers as well. But
yeah, I get that.
Yes.
I get that.
But that being said, well, you cannot just say what happens in the black box stays in the black box.
Well, they like it that way.
I know, but that's not how things are.
They don't know what's going on in the black box, as it turns out.
And this is why you have to teach your algorithm what it can do and what it cannot do, because otherwise there is a risk that the algorithms will learn the tricks of, like, the old cartels. We just had a really old school truck cartel of 6 companies colluding on prices and on environmental benefits on trucks. And we had to fine them almost 4 billion euros for their behavior. And we don't want algorithms to learn the tricks of the old cartelist. Right. We want them to play by the book, also when they start playing by themselves.
So lastly, I want to finish up and very quickly and talk about where it goes from here and what are your biggest concerns. We were talking backstage. We both have teenagers. You're not very surprisingly. I'm like a European regulator with strictness on my kids, and you're not. You let them do what they want, or what?
Well, I don't think that parents should be friends with their children on Facebook or Snapchat or whatever.
Really, how can you make them miserable then? How does that work?
Well, that's a real-life competence, and I tell you, I master it.
Yeah. So you, when you're thinking about your kids and the impact on what they're having, one of the things that's being discussed in Silicon Valley and Hollywood and everywhere else is around sexual harassment, around all kinds of issues. But it really boils down to an idea of diversity. And that's another, do you feel like that's your purview, that we were talking about this, that when you're thinking about AI and various things, it seems like crap in, crap out. And if you have the same people designing these systems all the time, the same kind of people. Do you think that's something that's part of your purview, or you as a regulator?
Well, two things. First of all, I see my oldest daughter. She puts down her phone, and she uses it less and less.
Yeah.
Because she has a real life in real life. And that, I think, is a very good thing. The new generation is doing all kinds of things also when it comes to the sustainability goals. They're engaged differently in their society. They are not just all on their screen. And that's, I think, is a very, very good thing. But we have to take our democracy back. We cannot leave it, neither to Facebook or Snapchat or anyone else. We have to take democracy back and renew it. Because society is about people and not about technology.
And going forward, what do you think your biggest focus is going to... The last question, what do you think your biggest focus for the next year is going to be on, in a very short...
Well, the next focus is going to be on whether we think that we can trust technology or not.
No.
Because this is the biggest wake-up call we've ever had. We've seen the potential. Now we get the fear of what it will bring us. If we don't relearn to trust technology, then we'll never make any good of the potential.
Margrethe Vestager, everybody.
Thank you.
The most inspiring creative conference in the world.
The Mecca of tech entrepreneurship.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Businesses need to take a greater responsibility too.
This is the most important operating system.
Good and bad about the internet is that it really amplifies the good and bad of humanity.
You never want to be the smartest person in the room? Well, when I'm here, I don't have to worry about that.
You have to be hungry and curious, and this is a place where you can come and sustain that curiosity.
Find something that you're willing to die for and live for it.
My biggest failure as a leader is I didn't ask for help when I should have done.
And when I sit on a stage here and look out, I see this incredibly diverse audience of people that I love to connect with.
The reason I'm here today is to talk about equality.
It is one of the best tech events in the world.
What other place can I be? I'm in heaven.
I never saw content at scale like this before. I don't think any of us did.
I'm waiting for the next transformative invention. It's been quite a while, like a decade.
There has to be fun, and there has to be business, and if you can mix both, then that's great. That's a great result, and New Orleans is a pretty good place for that.
Collision is good. It's not actually that good. The video is just really good. Anyway. Wow. So, our next guest has been the President of the European Council, the head of the UNHCR, and of course, a former Prime Minister of Portugal. Fresh from taking office earlier this year, please welcome the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres.
Welcome to Lisbon. Welcome to my hometown. It's an enormous pleasure to be with all of you today. I am an engineer, and for the time being, I'm also Secretary General of the United Nations. And we are all here because we believe in the force of science, of innovation and technology. But from my perspective, what is important is to combine innovation in technology with innovation in public policy to make sure that innovation works for the good of humankind. Now, let's look a little bit into the recent past to be able to project the near future. In the last few decades, we have witnessed an enormous impact of innovation, of science, of technology, combined with globalization in our world, in our economies, in our societies, in our lives. And that impact was essentially good. Enormous increase in growth of trade and economy, huge growth of the global middle class and drastic reduction in the number of absolute poor, very meaningful improvement in the living conditions of the overwhelming majority of the population, growth in life expectancy, decrease in child mortality, soaring literacy rates. Globally, it is clear that our world has been moving for the good. But there was some collateral damage of this enormous growth. And I would like to notice 2 points. First, climate change. Second, growing inequality. I believe climate change is the defining threat of our times. And climate change combines with a different other set of megatrends, population growth, chaotic urbanization, food insecurity, water scarcity, being climate change the engine, the main accelerator. And this interrelation is creating, as we all see, what is probably the biggest threat to our planet today. We see hurricanes and other natural disasters becoming more and more frequent, more and more intense, and with more devastating humanitarian consequences. We see at the same time desertification making progress, human environments being destroyed, people having to flee, massive movements of population, refugees and migrants. And at the same time, we see a larger competition for resources that triggers instability or conflict and makes climate change also a security problem in today's world. At the same time, growing inequality. 8 men, because they are men, not women, 8 men own as much wealth as half, the poorest half of humanity. And as we live in an environment of global prosperity, it is more difficult for people to feel they are left behind. People, but also sectors and regions in the rust belts of this world, that looking, because globalization is also a globalization of communication, looking at the rest of the world, knowing what's going on around, feel sometimes discriminated, they feel angry, and this is a factor of instability and conflict. And it is undermining the trust of people in relation to institutions, the trust of people in governments, the trust of people in relation to international organizations like the UN, the trust of people in relation to political establishments. And this has also helped the development of forms of populism, xenophobia, racism that are undermining the social cohesion of our societies. Which means we need to be aware that globalization is a force for good, that development of new technologies is a force for good, but we need to be attentive to be able to respond to the eventual collateral damage that exists. Now, there is a way to respond. To respond to climate change with climate action, to respond to increased inequality with a struggle for a fair globalization. And the international community was able last year to come to 2 historic agreements One, the Paris Agreement on climate change. Second, the Agenda 2030, approved by all nations in the world with a perspective of inclusive and sustainable development, with the so-called Sustainable Development Goals, with the objective of leaving no one behind. But the problem, as you can imagine, is a problem of implementation. It's very good to have a Paris Agreement in climate change, but first of all, the Paris Agreement is not enough. Even if the Paris commitments will be met, the temperatures in the world will be rising more than 3 degrees in the end of the century, and that would be catastrophic. And on the other hand, it is also clear that not all countries are abiding by the commitments made in Paris, which means we need to have an enhanced ambition in relation to climate change. And the same applies to fighting for a fair globalization. We need to be able to combine efforts of governments, of companies, of the business sector, of financial markets, of the civil society, in order to make sure that we are able to eradicate poverty, to bring education and health for all, to clean the oceans, and to do a number of other things that are essential for the life in our planet to be sustainable and to be inclusive. And again, this is difficult. The problem is implementation. But the good news is that science is on our side. Look at climate action. Today, it's clear that thanks to new technologies, thanks to green technologies, the green economy is the economy of the future. The green business is the good business, and you can at the same time make money and do good. And the same applies, and the same applies to the combination of new technologies that represent what we call today the fourth industrial revolution in relation to information and communication technologies, and namely artificial intelligence, that has been so many times mentioned tonight, but also biotechnologies, nanotechnologies, and other forms of innovation that will allow us to create the conditions to be able to have indeed a growth and a development that benefits everybody, and to create the conditions to combine simultaneously what was the spectacular development we witnessed in the last decade, but with taming the climate and being able to make sure that the benefits of development are distributed by all. So science is on our side. And I am a true believer that this fourth industrial revolution can be the answer to the main questions that we are putting ourselves today, facing the enormous difficulties that we are still facing in the different aspects of social inequality, in the different aspects of the deterioration of the environment, and in the different other threats to our collective life. But as in relation to the past, we need to be able now to look into the near future with a strategic vision, and combining the action of governments with the private sector, with researchers, academia, the civil society, in order to be able to make sure that this fourth industrial revolution is indeed in all its aspects a force for good. Now, it is clear that this fourth industrial revolution will have a dramatic impact in our societies, in our way of life, but also in labor markets. And it's very important to anticipate the potential negative impacts of this technological evolution. Just to give an example, in the country where I live today, in the US, the profession that has more people working in it is driving. Now, very probably, in a few years' time, we will not need drivers for cars, drivers for trucks, and drivers for the majority of the equipment we have to handle. So we risk to have massive unemployment, both in the developed and the developing world, with the development of some of the new technologies that we are facing. The answer is not, of course, to stop that development. The answer is to be able to adapt the way we work in our societies in order to be able to anticipate this trend instead of responding to it when it comes and doing it too late, as it sometimes has happened in the past. And that means a revolution and a massive investment in education and training. And the education we need for the future is different from the education we are used to discuss. It's not how to learn to do things, but how to learn, because the things we do will not be done tomorrow. And the way we think our educational systems need to be essentially rethought. Safety nets, social safety nets need also to change. And even the way we look at work and leisure, the way we divide our times, the way we divide our lives, will have to change quite dramatically. And so it is absolutely essential that governments, the civil society, the business sector, the academia, work together, discuss together, raise these issues that have been ignored in the public debate, because those are the issues that will allow us to be able to face the future and to avoid the mistakes of the past. And my appeal to those that are in this Web Summit, again, governments, businesses, academia, researchers, scientists, is to start seriously discussing the impacts of the fourth industrial revolution in the societies of tomorrow. And then, as it was said in several of the interventions we heard, science and technology are not value neutral. We can use genetic engineering to get rid of diseases, and that is fantastic, but we can use genetic engineering to produce monsters, and that is terrible. We can use the cyberspace to facilitate our lives in everyday work that we do and in all other aspects of the way we live in a community. But we can also use the cyberspace to facilitate the recruitment of terrorists for terrorist organizations. Now, when we are aware of this fact, I think it's important to think how we can make sure that innovation is a force for good. And there are, I think, two things we need to avoid. First is the stupid reaction to say, let's stop innovation. And it is stupid because it is impossible and because it will not allow to take benefit of all the positive aspects of innovation. So those that say this is too dangerous, too complicated, it's better to stop it, I think that they have no point. And second thing, to avoid the naive approach to think that traditional forms of regulation, like the ones we have today for energy or for the financial system or for the insurance system, can solve the problem. The truth is that those forms of regulation that are usually managed by governments or by intergovernmental organizations take time, they are complex, they are one-sided, and obviously they are not able to respond to the fast-changing world we are now facing with these new technologies and new forms of innovation. Which means that the only way to be able to establish mechanisms of regulation for the future will have to be different. We'll have to combine all stakeholders. We'll have to bring together governments, companies like the ones we heard today, scientists like the ones like Stephen Hawking that spoke to us, but also the civil society, the academia. And again, establish platforms of discussion how to do norm setting, how to establish regulatory frameworks that are flexible, that allow to combine the freedom of innovation that is absolutely essential for the future of humankind, but to combine it with the protection of human rights that is absolutely essential also to preserve the social cohesion of our societies. Governments cannot do it alone. Intergovernmental organizations like the UN cannot do it alone. This needs to be done by all actors, coming and discussing it together, and this is why the Web Summit is so important here today. And to do it properly, we need to make sure that we combine our energies, to make sure that we are able to put all our experiences together, and that we use opportunities like these to seriously discuss the problems that we face, and at the same time to maximize the potential of the enormous advantages that the innovations we are discussing can provide to our world. I do believe that this Web Summit is an opportunity for us to come together, and coming together to make sure that the power of science, the power of technology, and the power of innovation are a power for good, to make a better world and for the benefit of us all. Thank you very much.
So tomorrow we are absolutely bombarded chock-a-block with hundreds of incredible entrepreneurs across more than a dozen stages, presenting some of the most incredible ideas, from robots to driverless cars and drones. And this evening, I think, gives us an opportunity to set the tone, to let us reflect on the importance of the impact of technology on the world. And then tomorrow, you'll be able to wander across this huge campus and discover some of the most incredible people doing the most wonderful, wonderful things. And I'm really looking forward to it. We're getting close to officially opening this year's Web Summit. I'm now going to call on the Prime Minister of Portugal to join us on stage. Mr. Prime Minister. How are you?
How are you? Fine.
Once again, just an absolutely huge thank you on behalf of all of our staff and all of the attendees for hosting us. Over to you.
Thank you very much. These people are all your friends?
Personally, yeah.
Coming from all over the world?
Yes. Yeah.
All over the world?
All over the world.
Really?
Yeah.
Who is coming from America? And from Asia? And from Europe?
Oh!
E Portugal? Wow. You have a lot of friends here in Portugal.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Well, thank you all for coming to Lisbon and for coming to the Web Summit. It's really an incredible honor for Portugal to host for the second time the Web Summit. Web Summit is not only making Lisbon the capital of entrepreneurship. It put Lisbon at the heart of the global debates, of the great global issues, the hopes, the fears, and the global changes we are facing, from artificial intelligence to climate change or to reduce inequality. Because digital is not all about clouds and codes. Even in the digital era, as at its heart, at its soul and brain, people. And face-to-face will always be the best way to meet people, to share moments and ideas, and to take those ideas to invest and make them into business. Lisbon is, of course, the natural place for such meetings. It has been, over the centuries, meeting place for people of all cultures and backgrounds, from all across the world. Our history, our geography, and our culture made us an open society. People crossroads, and of course, a bridge between different continents. É orgulho, como Primeiro-Ministro, o trabalho, a dinâmica, a vibração do ecossistema das startups portuguesas. A forma como a capacidade de iniciativa, a inteligência, a criatividade têm transformado... What's happening? Como a criatividade, a energia têm oportunidades, as ideias e aquilo que têm aprendido. E aquilo que quero pedir a todos é que aproveitem muito bem esta semana e as oportunidades de se darem a conhecer, de darem a conhecer Portugal, de conhecerem pessoas de todo o mundo e com elas também aprender. Aprendemos sempre com os outros e é com os outros que nós estamos todos a construir um país melhor num mundo que queremos também melhor. I do hope the light of Lisbon inspires you and draws out the bright side of your time here at Web Summit. Enjoy every bit of these few days. And we stay here waiting for you and welcome when you want to return as a tourist, as an investor, or simply, and most important, as a friend. We are always waiting for you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a million. So I'd now like to call the Mayor of Lisbon up on stage. Fernando has been a fantastic partner and a huge supporter of us over the last 2 years. Put your hands together for the Mayor of Lisbon. Thank you so much. Just before you begin, Web Summit really wouldn't be possible without the incredible support of the startup community in Portugal. And I'd like to invite up many of the entrepreneurs that have been working closely with us over the last 2 years up on stage to join us for the opening. Please give them a warm round of applause. Mayor, would you like to say a few words, perhaps?
Well, just a simple word of welcome. Welcome you all to Lisbon. I hope that you have the time to know better the city, to feel the city, to love the city, and to live the city as a friend. Our partnership with you, our partnership with Web Summit is a long-term one. Paddy said today that partnership with Lisbon is like a very good marriage. We think the same. Because all the Web Summit is about the future, technology, innovation, humankind. So, the same way that I made last year, we have a small gift here to Paddy. Last year it was the keys of the city. This year it's going to be something a little bit different, an astrolab. So, I want to give you here in the name of the city, in the name of all of us, this astrolab, meaning two things. First, Lisbon was the capital of the world 5 centuries ago. From Lisbon departed routes to discover new worlds, new peoples, new ideas. From Lisbon departed a great adventure that connected humankind. So what we are making here now today is renewing that adventure that is now departing from Lisbon. 500 years ago, it was the navigators that crossed the oceans. Today is you, the engineers, the entrepreneurs, the creators, the innovators, the startups, all the companies. But this astrolab has a second message. The innovation that Lisbon faced 500 years ago, it was due because Lisbon and Portugal were an open society. Lisbon was the place of everyone that was escaping from other parts of the world could face a safe haven, could have their lives, could have developed their innovation, their process. This astrolab was developed here in Portugal for someone that was escaping from Spain at that time. So what my message here today is the importance for our future is to keep all societies, our cities, open cities. Liberty, tolerance, diversity, capacity to understand and to talk each other are the values of Lisbon, are the values that we want to keep a good and strong message from here. Welcome to Lisbon. Welcome to your home too. Thank you.
Prime Minister and Mayor, I'd love you to officially open Web Summit.
And the countdown?
Is it the countdown?
3, 2,
Whoa! 6,
back here tomorrow. Doors open to the Altice at 9 a.m. Enjoy Night Summit. Thank you so much. Good night.